Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Selfish Woman. I've got a treat for you today. We have Amy Green Smith in the house, and Amy is a certified and credentialed life coach and hypnotherapist, masterful speaker, and courageous communication expert. Amy uses her roles as coach, writer, podcaster, and speaker to move individuals to a place of radical personal empowerment and self-worth. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, Val. I'm stepping out today.
Hey, sorry, you just cut out there.
Oh,
I'm gonna
hi,
just
Val. So excited to connect with you.
Thanks. Yeah, so excited to have you here and chat. I feel like we have a lot aligned as far as our, what we love to talk about and where we're at with being coaches. Hypnotherapist, though, that's something that I don't do, but I'm very interested in. I used to
Mhm.
do a lot of like the self-hypnosis on YouTube,
Mhm.
for like sleep and
Yep.
stuff. And I love
Mhm.
that. But yeah, I can't wait to hear about more of that from you. But hey, let's start with a little bit of background. So tell me about how you got to this place in your life. Like what's led you to being this powerful speaker, communicator, all the amazing things you do. What's brought you here?
Well, I think my story is probably similar to many in our field where a lot of the lessons that you had to learn the hard way end up becoming the thing that you kind of teach in the world. And
Yeah.
and my life is very congruent with that. So, for a bit of context, I grew up in an extremely conservative, born again Christian family. My father had a master's in divinity and a doctorate in ministry. So, he wasn't fucking around.
He is serious about it.
And so, yeah, yeah, it was pretty hardcore. And so, needless to say, a lot of my upbringing was quite shrouded in motivation from guilt and fear and emphasis on being the good girl and you're broken and need saving and a lot of detrimental messages. But I was the kind of consummate good girl and I was on honor roll and put myself through college and out of um sort of out of the path that I was going, my two younger brothers both had a really difficult time with the law and didn't go to school, did some jail time. So, and I say that for something that comes up a little bit later, but I was the good kid and everything kind of came to a head in '07, at the time that my father passed away. And prior to that time, I was very good at shape shifting. So when my husband and I would go see my family, I would kind of say, okay, no cussing, no Jon Stewart, no South Park, no liberal agenda, like let's keep it tight, no drinking,
Hmm.
keep it buttoned up. And so I was used to walking around with a bit of a veneer. So at the time that my father passed, I felt very strongly that I wanted to do the makeup for his viewing. I had been working as a makeup artist for many years and was transitioning into personal development at the time. And so I felt like it would be kind of an asshole move to be like, Dad, get your own makeup artist. I'm like, I have this skill set. I'm rolling in there and I'm going to do makeup on my dead dad. So I, kind of felt like I was winning at daughter that day. I spoke to crowds of, hundreds of people for a eulogy. We get back home to my mom's house and she finds it kind of the most opportune time to say, it feels as though your father and I have failed as parents because the three of you, grouping me in with my two brothers who had a very different life path, the three of you are not, quote, walking with the Lord, that we
Mm.
were not subscribed to our faith traditions. So the only thing I could kind of muster in that moment was to say, I don't think you should say that to a child. And, I'm like, maybe there's a teaching moment. And my mom said, well, that's just how I feel. And I'll tell you what, Val, that was sort of the breaking point. That was the pivotal moment where I decided that in order to give voice to who I was and what I believed in, that actually meant that someone else was going to have to be disappointed in me and
Mm.
not be happy with who I was. And I don't think that speaking up for yourself myself or establishing boundaries are always an ultimatum. However, if push does come to shove and I have to decide between making you happy and making me happy,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to choose me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you the trajectory after that was awful. I was combative. I was adversarial. I think I also felt it like it was more equal because it was just my mom and I kind of going to head instead of
Yeah.
me against two. And it took me many, many times of cleaning up my mess and saying, hey, I still feel very strongly about what we were discussing. However, I should never have said it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of led me into this world of recognizing and teaching women that your voice matters, this internal element of I am enough, I matter, I'm worthy. And then this external component of, well, then how does that inform my communication with everyone else?
Yeah.
Now, what does it look like to say no, to establish boundaries, to have a tough conversation, to ask for a divorce
Mm.
with grace and kindness,
Mm.
or ask adult children to move out of the house with
Mm-hmm.
compassion and empathy. So yeah, when I speak about boundaries and things like that, it's not because I rolled out of the womb being able to do that.
No, really?
Yeah,
Huh.
that's exactly right. So
What I love, there's so much I love about your story. And one of the things that really stood out to me was the way that you grew into finding your voice. And like you said, we don't just come out of the womb knowing this. Nobody's born with it. But I think we're so hard on ourselves when we're trying to grow, we're trying to learn how to set boundaries, especially with family or loved ones. It can be so hard. And, hearing that you failed and you tried again and you failed and you tried again is so reassuring, I think, for so many women who are listening, who are like, here I am again, doing this stupid thing, getting in the argument, not setting a boundary. But you kept
mm,
trying again. You kept picking
that's
yourself
right.
up and learning. And that's what I'm hearing in that is like so much grace we can have for ourselves through that process of like, okay, we're
Mhm.
learning, we're trying, we're failing, but we're not giving up.
That's right. Well, and I think something that we cannot ignore is how programmed we are to acquiesce, to people please, to make sure everyone else is happy. In
Yeah.
fact, if we look at just our primitive makeup, if you did not belong to a group, to a body of other humans, that meant impending death. So
Hmm.
that's where we get things like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where one of our primary human needs is for one of belonging. It's not that we are trying to please our parents just for the fuck of it. We're
Hmm.
actually wired that way because our lizard brain says, hey, bitch, you might die.
Yeah,
You might die if they don't approve of you.
that's
And
right.
now that kind of translates into our social circles, or if our in-laws don't approve of us, or if we don't land this speaking gig or this business partnership or whatever, we think I might die on a subconscious level.
Mhm.
Consciously, we just go, what's wrong with me?
That's right.
And that's our lovely inner critic coming in to share some commentary.
As always.
Yeah.
But exactly. So we need this. We have this subconscious need for belonging as a survival mechanism, which throws us into the shape shifting you mentioned, and the people pleasing, and the being who I think you need me to be accepted and loved. And yet at the same time, we have this element now as adults where it's like, okay, I understand why that's happening. But now, what is my responsibility to take ownership of that? And I think that's a piece that gets tricky
Yeah.
for people is like, how do you have this compassionate understanding of the reasons why I'm doing it while at the same time taking responsibility for changing?
Yeah, there's something that I call declaring the do-over, because I think so much of the time we think, if I didn't handle myself with poise, if I didn't handle that conversation the way that I wanted to, or if I told someone, hey, that's okay, and it wasn't okay, I'm building all of this resentment. We think, okay, chance is gone. I've lost it. And no, you can circle back with
Mhm.
anyone. You can go back to a friend and say, hey, listen, that conversation we had yesterday, it didn't sit the best with me. And I'd love to just kind of toss it around with you a little bit. Or, hey, and I've done this before in my own life where I overcommitted to something and I very quickly said, hey, listen, I really should have never said yes yesterday. And before we get too involved in this, I need to very humbly retract my name from this endeavor. And I am sincerely sorry for it. But I think it's about towing the line between knowing what you're capable of, but then also knowing that you are human. So a lot of times with my students, I'll say, hey, this is a human hall pass situation where you need to go, listen, I know these tools, but just because we know these tools doesn't mean we use them flawlessly every single time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, okay, we're human. And now, given this circumstance, is there anything for you to clean up?
Mm.
But one of the things that I see so commonly is that we'll get locked into some sort of relationship, whether it be family, business, intimate partnership, and we will label them as toxic, overbearing, controlling, narcissistic. And as long as we can have our feet firmly planted in a moniker for them,
Mhm.
we can not look at our own shit, right? Because it's all their fault.
Totally.
I
Totally.
get to be a victim. And also, but here's what I will say. And I know you've had my dear friend Kate Anthony on your show talking about
Yes.
divorce. There are times when, and she and I have conversed about this, I do think it's helpful to have wording, nomenclature, and verbiage around what you're experiencing. Like,
Mhm.
oh, that's hyperfixation or that's parentification. I think that is helpful. But here's what I will say. If you are constantly and chronically complaining about someone in your life that you have yet to voice the grievance, or you've mentioned something, but they would have no idea what a big deal this is for you, then that's on you. It's a
Mhm.
very different thing if you've voiced your grievance over and over again in a calm, assertive way, and they've shown you they're not interested in meeting you there.
Yep.
But if you are wondering, where do I need to establish a boundary? Where do I need to start speaking up? And where do I need to stop people pleasing? It's usually with the people we complain about chronically and constantly
Hell yes.
without them knowing
Yes.
what a big deal it is.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. So, okay, this leads me to something I'm really excited actually to get your input on because I've been talking about this a lot. So,
Mm.
in my own life, I can look back at my marriage, and I can see how I did exactly what you said, right? He's a narcissist, or he's manipulative, or he's toxic, and look at all these behaviors, and he's an alcoholic, and right? Which let
Mhm.
me come out looking like the innocent, victim. And that was a subconscious pattern I was in to almost it's almost like this self-righteousness as a people pleaser of like, well, look at everything I do and I'm not appreciated and da, 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 right? It's this whole narrative that I had for myself. And when I started waking up to that, I started seeing like, wait a second, is people pleasing a form of manipulation?
Mm.
Am I using that shape shifting? I'm doing everything for you. Is it actually a way to not have the other person upset or mad with me so that I feel comfortable? And this is something I'd love to hear your input on. Are we actually like manipulating the person or the situation by shape shifting? Because actually what we're doing is we're needing to not be uncomfortable about not being liked, someone being disappointed. Like, tell me what you think about that.
This is like the best question I've ever been asked. I love this. And there's so much nuance here.
Mm-hmm.
So, is it manipulation?
Yeah.
Yes. Is it a bad thing? No. So this
Mm.
is where we have to really look for nuance in our behaviors. So people pleasing, like I mentioned earlier, is a part of our primitive makeup. It's actually related to our fawn response, which is I'm sure you're familiar, we talk about fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. It's ways that we deal with a captor, an aggressor, in order to stay safe. So for example, as I identify as queer, if I am in an environment that is heavily aggressive and damaging to LGBTQ plus folks, that's probably not my time to wave my rainbow flag.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the time for me to go, sure, yeah, fuck them, bye, and like kind of,
Right.
like save my life, right? And so many people can actually relate to this if you grew up in an abusive household, or if you're in a relationship with someone who abuses substances
Yeah.
or is verbally abusive. We use people pleasing to walk on eggshells in order to stay safe.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a very different motivating factor than I need to manipulate this person so that they do everything that I want them to do
Mm,
from a malicious place.
mm,
So if you are people pleasing in a situation where you are actually in danger, congratulations, you're employing a defense tactic, and that is completely fine.
mm-hmm.
So I think it's about us figuring out, am I acquiescing? Am I shape shifting to stay alive? Or am I doing this because my self-worth depends on it?
Mm,
Because we do that a lot too, where we go, I need my in-laws to love me. I need this person to love me because I don't have any other mechanism for enoughness or worthiness. So
yeah.
it's about your motivating factor. But I had a colleague who would always say, yeah, people pleasers are fucking liars, because they are. And so
Yeah.
you think about it, it's like sometimes lying behooves you. Sometimes that enables you to stay alive. And in other situation, it robs you from authentic interactions. So I would also say to everyone listening, if you're thinking about, I want to attract an intimate partnership, or I want a really rich, amazing group of friends, you're probably not going to want to attract a bunch of liars. You're going to want to attract people who are
Yeah.
authentic,
Yeah.
and you feel safer around people who tell you the truth.
Yeah.
However, in certain relationships,
Sorry, Amy, you're frozen.
if you were my client, that would be the thing that I would look at is,
Sorry. Can we
oh,
just go back to the
yeah.
beginning of what you were just saying there? There we go.
So if you were my client, my first piece that I would look at is your safety. Is this person verbally abusive? Are they emotionally abusive? Are they physically abusive? Because those sorts of individuals, you cannot layer on healthy communication and expect it to work.
Mm,
So, as a practitioner, the last thing that I want are women to think, oh, if only I could communicate better, then I could get through to this person. Not necessarily.
yes.
So, one thing that I would ask you as a qualifier is, does this person ever take ownership? If there's a little bit there of like, yeah, I can see where I went wrong, or yeah, that makes a lot of sense, or I'm going to work on that, then we might have something to work with. But if it's someone who's constantly saying, no, Val, if you would get your shit together, we'd be fine. Or if you just didn't do this, then I wouldn't have to do this. Now we're dealing with somebody who's not capable of having that level of communication. So it's way more about your safety than it is about reaching any sort of conclusion with the
Yep.
relationship, if that makes sense.
I love that differentiation you're making, because I think we need to hear that. Because so what you're saying is, if it's physically, emotionally, or verbally abusive or unsafe,
Mhm,
then the way that we are showing up as people pleasers is our survival mechanism
mhm,
to be safe in that relationship, as opposed to a relationship that where we're not in danger, but we're still showing up. And I loved what you said about the difference between survival and self-worth. That's
yes.
a whole different ballgame. And I can see how when I got out of that relationship, I still kept showing up that way, like you said, because of self-worth. It's like, oh, I don't want them to be mad at me. And so
Mhm,
I'm going to just, pretend I'm fine when I'm not. That's a
mhm.
different motivation. And I love that differentiation you're making.
And that's why I think we have to take all of these concepts, like narcissism, like someone being labeled toxic, people pleasing, perfectionism, and we have to acknowledge the nuance. So, for example, in personal growth, we shit on people pleasing, we shit on perfectionism. But if I am going in for brain surgery, you better sure as fuck hope that that surgeon is a perfectionist.
That's right.
because zero room for error, my
Yeah.
friend. So there are places for that. But if I'm up till all hours of the night perfecting, you know, how one specific photo or something looks on my website, now that perfectionism's in control of me. It's stealing my joy. It's
Mhm.
inhibiting the things that I want. So I think this is also why I will frequently say it's called personal development for a reason, because it's fucking personal. It's going to be different in each scenario. There might be
Yeah.
a situation where people pleasing is really, really holding you back. Maybe it's in your place, where you've been just taking on way too much. And instead of giving voice to that to the appropriate party, you come home and your partner gets an earful or your bestie gets an earful. But that person, they might think, A, Val loves taking on that much. B, Val's super, super fast at it. So it's not that hard for her.
Mhm.
And usually the logic is, I'm sure if it was a big deal, she would say something.
Mhm.
So I operate under this mantra of you need to at least give people the opportunity to be what you need.
Mm.
That's your responsibility.
I love that. Give people the opportunity to be what you need. Because if you don't, if you're just saying yes, 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 you're not giving them that opportunity to rise up, to support you, to offer you what you might need. And then we just sit in our resentment of like, being all things to all people, but we're not taking that responsibility to actually say like, hey, I can't do that, or I need some support. I love that.
Yeah,
Um, Okay.
absolutely.
What about this? So, all right, Amy, we get it. We get it. We need to speak up. We need to say what we mean, what we think, what we feel, keep ourselves safe, but speak up. Okay, but how about this relentless thing about needing others to like us or caring about other people's opinions about us? What about that? Because I hear this all fucking day, uh, terrified to speak up, whether it's online or in my family or at work or in my relationship or wherever. So scared of what the other person's opinion is going to be. What do we do about that?
Yeah, so there are a lot of steps to this. So I want to give you like just some basic places to start. We have to start untethering the idea that someone's opinion of us has anything to do with our self-worth and our truth.
Mhm.
Now, what it might do is it might hurt. We might have human emotion that goes along with these experiences. So, for example, if someone breaks up with you or denies you for a promotion, let's say, that's going to carry an emotional discomfort, sadness, rejection, overwhelm, frustration, shame, guilt, etc. Those emotions we usually take and make them mean that must be because I'm not enough, I'm not worthy,
Mhm.
I'm not lovable, I don't matter. So oftentimes it's about untangling with what we feel in a situation, and this is all about emotional intelligence and what we make that mean about our self-worth. So I have this analogy that I use, and I call it the house analogy. And it's basically you think about yourself almost like a house. And we have all of these different rooms and these intricacies and differences to who we are. Some rooms that we want everyone to see, some shit we don't want anyone to ever, don't look in that closet. Right. But we have our own worth as this home. Now, we will have people who come up to the porch of our house and they want to leave a pile of shit on the porch of our house. And that's like getting rejected, getting passed over for the promotion, somebody breaking up with you, someone saying, I don't want to be a friend with you anymore. Um, but we have the control of like, am I going to take that into my house and allow it to stink up the place? Or am I going to say, actually, I'm not currently accepting any piles of shit. I'm going, I'm going to recognize that that doesn't smell good, that doesn't feel good, but it doesn't have to mean anything about the worth of the home.
Mhm.
Now, conversely, you're going to have folks in your life who drop off beautiful gifts on the porch of your home. So that's like compliments, accolades, awards, promotions, someone saying they love you. So, of course, those are going to carry the human experience of feeling good, euphoria, bliss, excitement. So, those feel good. And now we get to decide, okay, my good pal, Val, brought me this beautiful vase. I'm going to bring that into my home, but it doesn't mean my home is now worthy. It just
Mm,
means I'm going to make my job easier by surrounding myself with things that make me feel good.
mm,
So no matter what, whether it's the shit or it's the beautiful gift, none of that changes the value of the home.
mm,
And so now it's about being with the breadth of human emotion, being with that sort of spectrum,
yeah, yeah.
Sometimes I feel awful, and that doesn't mean I'm not worthy. Sometimes I feel amazing and excited. That too does not mean that I'm worthy. So I think it's about part of that, that's very conceptual, but let's start taking stock of what we feel in an instant and ask ourselves, what am I making up about this? What
Yeah,
conclusion did I draw based off of how I'm feeling?
right.
And is that really true?
Yes. I love the house analogy. You don't have to bring in the shit if you don't want to, leave it on the front porch. But
Yeah.
also, what comes up for me with that is all right, so I don't like the shit of, let's say, I set a boundary with my mother-in-law and she's pissy about it. And she's
Hmm.
letting me know at the family dinner. So I don't like the shit of, her opinion of me or her
Right.
attitude. And
Yeah.
so what am I making that mean? I'm making that mean I'm not a good daughter-in-law, whatever. So I'm going to choose to
Hmm.
separate, detach from that meaning, and I can leave it on the front porch. But do you also think that it is a caring so much what other people think is a way of protecting ourselves from that potential negative emotion or difficult emotion that might be related to it? Because you talked about,
Hmm.
the hurt or the pain, the rejection that comes perhaps with that. Are we
Yeah.
trying to protect ourselves from feeling that by worrying or trying to shapeshift so that we don't have to deal with their opinion? Is that part of this too?
100%,
Yeah.
100%. Because if you have anyone in your life who you feel might be rejecting you, that sends a message to our mind of like, you might not survive this. You
Mhm.
might die. And again, that sounds so hyperbolic, but that is what is happening subconsciously. So in those situations, like where it's awkward as hell and it's in front of everybody, I also operate under the mantra of do not allow your silence to make you a liar.
Okay.
So I'm not going to, first of all, that doesn't mean I need to get involved in a big ass conversation at like a big family dinner table. But it does mean that I'm going to let it be known that I don't concur. So I will say something like, hey, I'm getting that you're not super happy with me. I don't think this is the time for us to discuss it.
Mm.
I'm happy to talk to you about this at a later time.
Hmm.
Um, and I find that the more you can just call things out, the better, but it's really, really difficult. So if you have a family who is always passive aggressive and you're kind of jabbing each other all the time, you can use that, but you have to use an addendum. So it might sound something like, let's say at a family dinner, your uncle wants to start, bringing up gun rights or talking about which I have had happen to me with my brother. Wants to start talking about it, wants to like get a rise out of you. I will say in those situations, like, hey, I don't share that opinion, but I certainly don't think we need to get into it. Or you can use the joking, you can use the passive aggressive and like, oh, who's the snowflake now? But in all seriousness, though, I don't think we need to talk about that right now. Or
Mhm.
I'd really like to hear what's going on with your business or what's going on over here with your sports team or whatever.
Redirect.
Redirect, change the subject. But you can use jokes, but you have to add the addendum of, in all seriousness, though, or all joking aside, I don't know if this is the time.
Yeah, right. And is that a way of setting a boundary?
Oh, 100%.
Uh-huh.
100%. Yeah, boundaries can come in completely different forms. But I had this exact scenario happen years ago. I was doing community theater, and there was a gentleman who showed me a picture on his phone that was very disparaging to a mentally and physically disabled child, which to me does not constitute humor or comedy. So he shows it to me, and he's kind of like, "Oh my God, ha ha ha!" Like, look, expecting me to just naturally start joking with him. And
Mm-hmm.
that would be the easy thing to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the cowardly thing to do, but easier. So I look at it and I'm going, okay, don't let your silence make you a liar. And I said, you know what? I actually really don't find that funny. I'd appreciate it if you just didn't show me that stuff in the future. So anyway, so am I going to see you in the green room? Who's on stage next? What scene are we running? Like changing the subject, but also not, don't get it twisted. I don't share that opinion, but I also don't need to get involved in it. I don't need to defend my position.
Mm-hmm.
I can just quite simply say, container of the conversation. Is it safe or not? No, I'm not going to participate in this container. It doesn't work for me. So I'm just going to dismiss myself.
Yeah, I
Politely,
love
excuse me.
that. I love that because so many times those of us who struggle with people pleasing will be silent or will laugh at the joke that we don't even think is funny because we don't want the discomfort of, am I going to offend that person? And yet,
Yeah,
like you said, don't let silence make you a liar. It's like, no, speak your truth, but do it in a way that's skillfully not engaging also in drama or arguing. And I love
that's
your
right.
addendum theory there, where you can just kind
Yeah.
of say it and then redirect, or say it and we'll talk about it another time. It gives you
Mhm.
that out of like, okay, I don't want to open the can of worms, but I also need to be truthful.
Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
this also goes for conversations you don't want to be a part of. So
Mm-hmm.
if somebody in is like, yeah, I mean, I had to deal with this for years and years and years of like, when are you guys going to have kids? You know, and I never wanted children. And it's also, we think that if someone asks a question, we naturally have to answer it. You don't. So in those situations, you can say something like, you know what, to be quite honest, it's not something I'd really like to get into. Or if people are like, when are you going to go back to school, or what's going on with this or that, most of the time people just don't know what the fuck to say. Like
Yep.
we're socially awkward. They're not coming at you from a place of malice, but it is up to you to stop that if it's not a conversation you're interested in having. And you can
Mm-hmm.
use varying levels of vulnerability. Like if somebody is asking you why you're still single, which is like, because single women without children are happier.
We're happier. Okay.
The research
Me
is
to be
in.
happy.
Yeah. But or if they're asking you about a job search and it's been really difficult, you can use vulnerability and say, to be honest with you, it's it's been a really difficult journey and I'm not really in a place to talk about it. I hope you can understand.
Mm.
So you're being vulnerable, but that vulnerability does not mean splayed wide open. It
Yes.
just means like saying what's there.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and then asking for what you need. That is vulnerable.
Yes. As Brene
Yeah,
Brown says, clear is kind.
that's right.
And that's it. You're being clear, but you're also having your boundary. And that's what I always say is like, we don't have to have a conversation that we don't want to have. Like we're
That's right.
allowed to not have it. And yet we can also be clear about it, like you said. And I love your real world examples that you give, because I think that helps to take the theory into the practicality of like, what do I do when it's my mother-in-law, or what do I do here?
Yeah.
Because that's when we get tied up in knots, when we're in those real-time examples and then we're like, and then, we go back to our old habits. So having those
That's
in our
right.
back pocket, those little tricks are so
Yeah.
helpful.
And that's something that I tell people to literally rehearse. So if there is a sticking point of something where you never know what to say, formulate your desired response.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's say another one for people is being asked for some kind of help. Like, will you chaperone this? Will you bake this many cupcakes? Can we borrow your lawnmower? Whatever. Can you help us move? And we go, oh my God, totally. Or we think we have to have something like, Beyonce tickets or something like that.
A
Something, or
valid reason. Yeah.
my mom's dying, enough to, just the fact that you don't want to, or not, don't have the physical or mental real estate to do so, that's a good enough reason. So having a stock response like, thank you so much for thinking of me. Unfortunately, I'm not available. I truly hope you can understand. And then rehearse that shit over and over and over and over again. So whatever your sticking point is, you have to create the script, and then you really have to practice it.
Yes. It's a skill, just like anything else. We
100%.
can learn it. We can do
Yes.
it. And like, yeah, if you're listening, like write down what Amy's saying, put it in your journal, practice it, rehearse it, try it in
Mm.
low stakes examples first, and then start building that muscle. But yeah, exactly. We have to have these responses available in the moment, or we go back to like, I'm in danger. I have to protect myself. I have to say yes.
And there's ways out of that too. Like you can stop yourself if you hear yourself going, yeah, well, when do you, yeah, I think I can do that. Well, when do you need it? And then going, you know what, I need to just stop myself right here. I don't think I can take on one more thing, to be honest. And I'm
Mhm.
super touched that you asked me. Or you can do the do-over and circle back in an hour, or, say
Mhm.
something that you'd rather say. But to your point that you were discussing with your partner prior to your separation, one thing that I tell people all the time, which is highly illuminating in relationships that are a little bit more volatile, is the minute the container becomes unsafe, to say, I'm happy to continue discussing this with you, but not if you continue to speak to me in that way.
Mhm.
And so you're addressing, like, it does the container in which we're discussing this, does it foster collaboration, or is it abusive? So if
Mhm.
there starts to be yelling and screaming, you always, you never, name calling, that's when you shut it down. I'm happy to continue to discuss this, but not if you speak to me in that manner.
Mhm.
Or you can even remove the word you and say something like, I'm feeling like tensions are getting a bit high. I would love to continue this. Why don't we take a break?
Yeah.
And
And
you'll start.
so,
Yeah.
and so we can keep ourselves safe without resorting to people pleasing. And that's kind of the way out I'm hearing in a volatile or unsafe
Mhm.
dynamic. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, I know I use people pleasing as a way to survive subconsciously here.
Mhm.
There's a better way. There's a better way to keep myself safe. And that is what you just said. It's like articulate
Yeah.
what's happening and then declare
Yeah.
your what you need and then give it to yourself.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And the only caveat is if it's extreme. And if it's extreme, I don't care what you say or do, just stay safe.
Yeah.
I don't care if you have to be people pleasing up the ass, do
Yeah.
whatever you need to do to stay safe. And we have how many history, like, if you are a fan of, even if they safe, you lose me again.
Sorry. Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry. Can you
yep.
start that part again?
Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of true crime, and there are so many examples of women actually surviving by acquiescing, placating the
Totally.
aggressor. There's that old, very sad statement of, men's biggest fear is being rejected by women, women's biggest fear is being killed by
Mm-hmm.
men
Mm-hmm.
for rejecting them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I mean. I mean, obviously that's an extreme example, but there are times when it does serve you, especially if you are in a marginalized identity. I won't
Yes.
get into that extremely, but yeah, that there's a time and a place.
Yeah. Yeah. So much to learn about this, but I feel like we've unpacked some really meaty stuff around people pleasing. And, for me, I'm taking away this big point between survival and self-worth
Mhm.
and really learning how to build self-worth and build that beautiful home as you talked about it, where the value isn't determined by what people leave on your doorstep, but by the house you're building. And that's
Yeah.
such a beautiful analogy that we can take away. And then these practical examples of how to speak our truth and at the same time keep ourselves safe. And so I know that like those are going to be things that our listeners are going to love, because we all want the practical, like, just tell me what to do, Amy. You know?
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
that's amazing. I wanted to, and I said at the beginning, I was going to bring up hypnotherapy because what I'm really fascinated about is the ability to get into the subconscious, because,
Mhm.
you know, I talk all the time about the subconscious mind and can we rewire the brain, and all the ways we can, you know, create new neural pathways so that we can actually change these old programs. But I'd love to just hear a little bit about how hypnotherapy works and how you use it to kind of, you know, bring another layer of healing in the work that you do.
Yeah, I could nerd out on this all day long. So so because I am such a fan of science, I love to talk about it more through a scientific lens because it has sort of it gets a bad rap as being kind of woo-woo, and it's
Mhm.
really not at all. So if you've ever had a situation where you're driving somewhere and you get to the store or you get to your location wherever you're going, but you don't remember the drive at all,
Totally.
that is a hypnotic trance. And you so consciously you're ruminating about, oh, I should have said this or should have said that, or you're replaying a fight you had with somebody. Subconsciously, your mind knows the directions to the store. It knows how to drive a car. It knows how that you don't have to consciously tell yourself any of that. So what we do in hypnosis is we put you into a slower brainwave state. That's all that it is. So we go through what is called a theta brainwave state every single day, twice a day, naturally, when we either awaken or as we go to sleep. So, depending on how active your brain is, it will have a specific frequency of brainwaves. So, when we're awake, we have like alpha, we have uh, all sorts of different ones. But then as you start to fade asleep, you'll go through theta, which
Mm-hmm.
is sort of that you can also feel it a lot when you're delirious and you're like, I need to go to bed. And you're
Mm.
like, wait, I don't even know what I'm saying. You're in hypnosis. And then when we're completely asleep, we're in a delta wave. It's the slowest brain wave. Um, so what's key about that is, and why it's important and helpful is essentially when you are in theta, your inner critic basically goes to sleep. So,
Mm.
when you're trying to tell yourself a new positive self-talk statement, like I am enough, or I love my body, and your inner critic goes, fuck no, you don't. Or they're like, how cute with your affirmations.
Yeah, as if.
Look who's playing personal
Whatever.
development. Yeah. And so the kickback is so unbelievably strong when you're conscious, when you're awake, that we very seldom continue on with affirmations because they feel such a lie. But when your brainwave state has slowed down, that little inner critic doesn't have to fight as much. You're in a safe environment. It kind of just goes to sleep. And that means that the messages that we feed during hypnosis can drop into the subconscious so much faster.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so it can be an expedited way to change what's happening in the subconscious mind.
Mm. I love that example or that explanation because it is about the science. And same, I'm like all about the neuroscience or the geeky
Yep.
science. But yeah, it makes so much sense when you explain it that way as to how that could exponentially help you to override the inner critic, let's call it, and
Mhm.
start to actually wire these new things we want to believe about ourselves. So going back to the self-worth piece, right? It's like if I want to believe that I'm worthy of love, let's say, but my inner
Mhm.
critic is like, yeah, whatever, bitch.
Mhm.
Who's ever going to love you? Okay, yeah, if we can override that, then I would imagine that the cultivating that actual deep cellular belief that I'm worthy is going to be, would you say easier, faster? What would you say?
Yeah, well, the approach that I take is I hit it from all angles. So I feel like there are two internal elements, and I think there are two external. The internal are conscious and subconscious. So in, oh, I'm sending
We
off
got
balloons.
balloons.
I'm not sure how I
It's
did
a
that.
party over here.
Let me see if I can do
Balloons
some.
on our
Oh,
screen. There
helps.
we go.
I need to turn that off. Um, oh shit. Apparently.
Subconscious and conscious.
Thank you. Thank
Got
you.
those two. The
I-
balloons distracted us.
yeah, that's right. Okay. So it's conscious and subconscious. And then externally, it's your environment and your behavior. It's
Mm,
like, how are we engaging in the world? So in the program that I teach, hypnosis. There's always a hypnosis track that goes along with the given module. And then when we start working through the beliefs module, which for almost everyone, there's something around not lovable, not enough,
mhm,
not worthy, I don't matter. Also, I'm not innately good. That's a
mm,
hugely common one.
mm.
So what we do then is I create subliminal hypnosis tracks. And this is one of my favorite homework assignments because we're completely bypassing the conscious faculty of the mind.
Yeah.
So we'll frame up these new beliefs that they want to attach to, and then they're set to music. I add in binaural beats, which are
Mhm,
a theta wave to help.
mhm.
So I'm like, if you start getting tired, try not doing it while you're, working or, doing dishes or whatever, because theta will naturally want to take you into a sleep state. Um, but then it just sounds basically like music, and you can hear a
Yeah.
little bit of the subliminals in the background, but not much at all. And the idea behind that, this is also why hypnotherapists snap sometimes
Mhm,
during when they're
mhm,
doing a journey, is it's designed to distract the conscious mind. So if
mm.
the conscious mind's like, what was that? Was that a snap? It's so much easier for the subconscious to just absorb the messaging, which
Ah,
just blows me away. But and then we'll do some, some one-on-one hypnosis stuff too, which can be really powerful.
yeah.
But yeah, I've seen stuff change in like one session. It's
Wow.
it's unreal.
That's
Yeah.
so cool. Got to be sneaky with our brains, don't we?
Yeah. Well, they're wired for survival, like we
Yeah.
were talking about earlier. If you grew up in a situation where you have a very positive association with people pleasing, because
Uh-huh.
that's how you avoided an abusive caregiver, now in your mind, we have to create a new association with people pleasing, because right now
Yes.
it's like it's the thing to use. So when we
Yeah.
start to detract from that, our brain goes, "Are you sure? Are you sure? We don't know what it's like to be
Mhm,
confident. We don't know what it's like to speak up. Are you sure?"
mhm, mhm.
That's why the inner critic that's why we say it's trying to keep you safe. It's trying to
Yeah,
keep you with what is known, even if
exactly.
that's not what you really want.
Yes, that's so cool. Yeah, we could talk about that all day, but thanks for that. I love that because I think it's becoming so much more and more popular, but a lot of people still, like you say, kind of think it's just this woo woo,
Mhm.
whatever. But yeah, it's such a powerful tool to continue to layer in all these different strategies for our own ability to rise above, right? Rise above the way that we were conditioned and find our ability to love ourselves, feel confident, set the boundaries, be a badass at communicating, all of the things.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, this was amazing. I really love chatting with you and I love how you explain things. It just makes so much sense. And, it's just something that women are ready. We're ready to deal. We're ready to evolve. We're ready for more. And so we've got to do our work. And it's a beautiful way that you serve women. So thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm always grateful to have a platform to just yell into a mic for an hour or so.
I know, exactly. And we're getting this message out and it's so important. So thanks for all that you do. How can we get into your world and into your community?
Sure. So the best place to find me is over at my little corner of the internet, which is amygreensmith.com. And I always say that those names are all spelled the basic bitch way, nothing exciting.
The way you think they're spelled is the way it is.
Just, yep. Yeah, pretty basic, Amy Greensmith. And then, like any self-respecting Gen Xer, I hang out the most on Instagram. You can find me
Mhm.
under the handle Hey Amy Green Smith, and same handle on pretty much all of social. But if you scoot over to my site, I've got tons of freebies. I've got some free hypnosis tracks and workbooks, and I'd be honored to send some of those your way.
Thank you so much. I will put the link in the show notes so you can check that out and go check Amy out and all of her amazing work. And it's been a blast. Thanks so much.
Oh, thanks, Val.
Okay, talk to you later. And thanks everybody for hanging out with us today. Have a great day.